Hello everyone and welcome, Valiath here. Week 2 on my Restoration Shaman ended better than I could ever have expected. In this video we'll go through 2 dungeon runs I did last week, a 2-chested plus 18 Dark Heart Thicket and my plus 20 Throne of the Tides. But before then, I did improve my tune quite a bit as I went through the week. I got my 4-piece set bonus squared away and I got my item level up to 358. I crafted the Elemental Lariat neck piece as well as a Signet of Titanic Insight Ring, which gave me 4 gem slots, making the Lariat quite powerful for me right off the bat. Thanks to all these upgrades, I was able to hit a 35% soft cap for crit, which hugely helped me throughout the week. I also managed to get KSM, and get my first 20 key done, Throne of the Tides. That felt amazing, and further solidifies that the Shaman is quite strong, considering I was able to do that with relatively low item level and still new to the class. Needless to say, it was a fruitful week for me, and I'm super happy with how my progress is going. Unfortunately, I was not able to try out any raid healing yet. Time just kinda slipped away from me this week as I have so many projects going on at the same time. I will be doing some raiding this coming week though for sure. I also wanted to take this moment and give a huge shout out to my channel's members, and a special shout out to my latest members, G3rd4th, Lyrics, Million Skopnik, and Sears Nick. I appreciate you guys, and I'm really happy to have you here. But let's get into what my buddy Shamath has been up to this week. I ran a lot of keys, and for some reason Blizzard decided that Dark Heart Thicket was going to be my challenge this week. I kid you not, I think my key got turned into a Dark Heart Thicket like 5 times throughout the week. I did manage to 2-chest an 18 Dark Heart Thicket early in the week, but I was still only 447 item level. Let me tell you, that was scary, but also super fun. We were originally going to run the 11 that I had, but the Pug DPS wanted to run his 18 key instead. It is also worth noting that Tank is a guildmate of mine, who was 456 item level and has only tanked for a little over a week. That made the dungeon even that much more challenging, but boy was it fun. I really had to utilize my knowledge of the dungeon to be able to do anything, as all my heals were hitting like wet noodles. We did the standard first pull here, and it scared the bejesus out of me, and I just ripped 2 fat CDs just to make myself feel a bit safer. In hindsight, rewatching this video, I really did not have to rip all of those CDs there. It would have been fine just using Ascendance and making sure my riptides were out at all times. Fast forward to the dreaded double bear pull. At this point I'm doing a much better job remembering to use Riptide and Primordial Wave, which is making my AoE healing much easier. I'm not constantly casting Chain Heal to eat up my mana, and I'm finally starting to get into the groove of how to play this healer. The first boss in here is quite fun, but the one thing that was a challenge for me was the Grievous Leap. Because my gear is so low, it was really tough to single target heal the person with the bleed, as my heals were just not hitting hard enough to top the person off. For you that don't know, you have to get the person up to above 90% health for the debuff to be removed. At one point, I'm straight up spamming Healing Surge into the hunter and cannot for the life of me get him past 90%. He was forced to use Exhilaration to help me out. Thankfully, he is also a guildmate of mine, and we were in Discord together so we could communicate how very funny it was of how ineffective my heals were. It was a really fun fight where I had to utilize my entire kit and stagger my CDs to make it through. But as you can tell, I am draining my mana very fast here at this point. I'm still roughly at 15% crit strike at this point, and my heals are just not effective enough compared to the damage output. The next challenge in here was the Oak boss. Man, does that guy hit hard, and oh boy was I made aware that I am punching up by being in this place to begin with. Part of the challenge here is that my tank is undergeared as well, and he's just getting meleeed incredibly hard by the boss. I have to give him some credit here though. For only having tanked 1 week, he is using his CDs pretty damn good. The boss does this knockback, which does a lot of damage to the group. I felt quite comfortable dealing with this though, with the Healing Wave and Chain Heal, and the group got topped off pretty quickly. The bigger issue is the Crushing Grip, where it picks up the tank and throws it at a random player. This does a ton of damage, and I once again just slam in healing into the tank and the target for what seems like absolutely nothing. My tank dies at the end because of it, as he didn't have a CD up fast enough and my heals were not doing enough. Thankfully we got a fast battle res up and we killed the boss without too many issues, all being said. After the fight, I was quite surprised at the healing meter. It is impressive that the class can push out those numbers with this little gear even if I'm feeling weak. The most challenging boss here by far is Drezoron. The forced movement via his downdraft ability makes healing this really difficult. I had to make sure that I keep my riptides up as much as possible and stagger my CDs for the downdraft and the AoE rock falling damage cycle. On the first one, I dropped down double healing stream totems, and right before the rock damage, I put down my healing tide totem as well. This helped me feel comfortable that I could focus on getting my riptides out instead of doing a ton of direct AoE healing. For the second damage cycle, I dropped down even more healing stream totems, and I also opted to use totemic recall to push out even more of them. Again, this helped me stabilize a bit so I could make sure I got some riptides out, and I comboed it into a nature swiftness and healing wave for a big AoE heal. On the last downdraft damage cycle, I used Spirit Walker's Grace so I could push out healing during the pushback, and as soon as the rock fall happened, I dropped down Spirit Link Totem to make sure we all survive it. The timings on this boss work incredibly well for shamans, I feel, and if you have a good understanding of the timings of the damage and your CDs, you can push through all of this damage quite well. We make quick work of the tunnel leading up to the last boss, with no problem. My one big fear on this guy is the feed the weak ability. This trucks a single player, and considering my single target heals are quite weak at the moment, I am expecting a mini heart attack on this one. Thankfully, my fears were a bit exaggerated, as the damage was not super terrible, and thankfully it never hit me, which would have been a big issue considering my low health pool. Outside of this, the big AoE damage event at 50% I planned for by dropping Spearling Totem as well as popping Ascendance. And it all went really well without any real danger. Phase 2 was actually pretty easy from a healing standpoint. Make sure you keep your Riptides out, use Healing Surge and Healing Wave to top people off, and you should do quite well. One thing to take note of though in Phase 2, the purple circles are bigger than they appear. I died to one of them here, and it's not the first time either. Give yourself some more room to avoid them. After this key, I ran a bunch more lower ones, several 11 through 18 keys just to get some gear, flight stones and crests. This is when I ended up crafting the Elemental Lariat neck piece as well as the Signet of Titanic Insight Ring. Both upgrades did help me out a lot, and it allowed me to get to the 35% crit cap. After 2-chesting at 18 Murazon's Rise, I got my hands on a plus 20 Throne of the Tides. Not the greatest key to do on Tyrannical Week, my second week of playing this class, as many of the bosses in there hit like an absolute freight train. Undeterred by this prospect of danger, I recruited 2 guildmates, Loktar and Fell to Death. Both are incredible key pushers and insanely good players. We got another couple of pugs for the run, and the tank did not care one bit that I was undergeared for this key level. I doubt he even looked at me, and he just decided to go head first and pull like he owned the place. As is standard, he does the really big first pull in here, and he even decides to pull the 2 oracles and sentinel in the back. This puckered my posterior quite a bit, and not only do I have to do tons of AoE healing, I now also have to contend with the single target healing absorb. Let's back up here for a minute and watch this pull again. I am making sure to make use of Capacitor Totem whenever it's available to help out with stuns. It may not be obvious at first, but properly using this totem to AoE stun groups is essentially the same as a healing CD, as it prevents a lot of damage for quite a bit of time, which helps you catch up if need be. Right off the bat, I send out my Capacitor Totem to try to stun as many of the enemies as possible, and I immediately follow up with a Healing Tide Totem to get that blanketed healing going out on my group. Shortly thereafter, I send out both of my Healing Stream Totems, and then I start peppering my group with Riptides, Healing Waves, and Healing Surges to make sure everyone survives. For the Healing Absorb, I am plowing Healing Surges into that target as fast as I possibly can. I am just praying there'll be enough for them to survive. The mini-boss gets taken care of without any problems whatsoever, and we make our way into the next corridor. And you guessed it, the tank is going to pull the entire place, including the double sentinels in the back. Thankfully, this tank is quite good, and the group is doing a very good job of avoiding damage to help me out, and I'm just barely able to push through both of those healing absorbs in time. I am doing a horrendous job keeping my earth shield up on myself and the tank. On this pull specifically, it would have been great considering both of those sentinels will hit the tank really hard. Thankfully, we got out of the pool without anyone dying, and I did decently well, I thought. For this next room, I'm doing my best here to make sure I don't use my CDs if I can help it. The first boss in here is an absolute pain to heal, so I want to make sure I have all of my CDs available going into it. I only had to use Ascendance to help with the last healing absorb, which works out quite well though, since I will have it up again when I need it. Some of the pulls in this room can be quite dangerous. Without the use of CDs, I need to be on top of my Riptides, Healing Waves and Healing Surges to make sure that I get everyone covered. Capacitor Totem is probably one of the best spells you can use in this room. There are multiple times you can use it effectively to stun an entire group to interrupt a bunch of casts. Not to mention, if you get it off in perfect timing, you can stun all of the oracles and witches and the dogs at the same time, which would be hugely helpful. Also, I've completely forgotten to mention Stormkeeper. You should try to use this as much as possible, and even better if you can combo it with Ancestral Guidance. The damage you can push out with 2 Chain Lightnings is quite large, and if you're using Ancestral Guidance, you can actually do a serious amount of healing with it. The first boss in here is tough, especially on tyrannical weeks. The AoE spell Focus Tempest does a lot of damage and will need to top off people really fast. Thankfully, my heals have become stronger. I am able to deal with the damage quite well. The intermission phase is where things get a bit harder, but thanks to the CDs we have, it is made much easier. I sent out Healing Tide Totem on the first one to help stabilize the group. With that up, I was able to comfortably heal the group during this phase. I make sure to try to move to safe areas when I see them to minimize my own need to move. You can also see here in the first intermission phase that I position myself behind the caster ad so I can use Thunderstorm to push it into the other ads. After the first intermission, I got comfortable with the level of damage going out, and I didn't feel the need to send out any big CDs for the rest of the fight. I make sure to drop down my healing stream totems and just keep sending out Riptides and try to help out with DPS when I could. We go straight into the second boss, which is quite frankly not that bad. Festering Shockwave is all we really need to pay attention to. I make sure to have all my Riptides out and a few quick healing surges and healing waves, and the group is quickly back up to full. I did use Healing Tide Totem towards the end, as I figured I may as well send it and try to help out with DPS as much as I can, as it'll be back up again when I need it for the third boss. Outside of that, this is really an uneventful boss, and we're just gonna kinda fast forward through it. We rip through the trash up to the third boss with no real issues. This boss is the one I was fearing the most. The dot he puts out on players hurts like hell, and if you're not prepared for it, someone can die very fast. Thankfully, we start the pull with me having all of my CDs available. Now, as if Blizzard knew this one was stressing me out, the game decided to put the dot on me and the druid quite a lot, both of us being the lowest item level by a wide margin. You'll see here when it gets put on us, it chunks us down really fast. As soon as it gets put on any of the other DPS, I just heal them through it and then dispel the second one that gets put out. Loktar and Fell to Death, they have the health pool to deal with it without my assistance too much. This fight is mainly also making sure your tank can take the hits from the boss when the totem is out. Thankfully, we had a warrior tank that can take melee physical damage like a champ. But other than that, it is 100% just managing the dot damage and when to dispel versus when to heal. And now for the dreaded gauntlet. Thankfully, the tank did a pretty good job with pacing in this part, to make sure we didn't have a ton of the debuffs going on when the sentry's AoE damage went out. That doesn't mean it was an easy heal. There was tons of damage going out, but it just needed one CD to push through this gauntlet, and that was Spirit Link Totem. That is likely one of the best CDs in the game to deal with this part in my opinion. I'm gonna let you guys watch the full run of this gauntlet, as it's actually a pretty good one. We have about 9 minutes to kill this last boss to time the key. We then proceed to do the probably worst job ever in the history of ever on this particular boss, and we kill them with just Loktar and fell to death alive. Treat this footage as an example of how not to manage the black puddles on the ground. We did such a horrendous job, it is tantamount to criminal behavior. It did not help that the druid died early on in the fight either, because I couldn't get him topped off and he did not use a defensive to try to stay alive. As you can see, this was a less than ideal situation to be in, but in the end, what counts is we got the kill and we got the portal in the bag. We did a terrible job coordinating stacks and grouping the adds, so we had puddles all over the place. And when it came to removing the puddles, there were just too much of it all over the place and we barely made a dent in it. Let this be a lesson. Do not ignore the puddles and their placement. It will quickly overwhelm you and can completely derail an otherwise clean run. As we finish off watching this absolute cluster of a last boss in Throne of the Tides, next week is a tough set of affixes, specifically the combo of Fortified with Bolstering. I have several very low keys for Fortified, so I feel confident I'll be able to at least get to 2300 to 2500 IO next week. We'll also try to clear out at least normal raid to see how that feels. That is going to be it for this Starting Fresh video, week 2. Thank you all for watching, and if you like this video, please remember to hit that like button. And as always, please remember to subscribe to the channel if you want to see more of this type of content. It is a great way to support me, and I really appreciate it. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one.